You know, I've stood on stages in front of thousands, delivered lines that echoed through kingdoms of ice and fire, and yet the moment that truly reshaped my life wasn't some grand audition or a director's innuendo. It wasn't the roar of applause or the weight of an Emmy in my hands. No, my turning point was a broken down bus on a rainy Tuesday in New York City back in the late 90s. Oh, picture this. I'm drenched, my script pages turning to mush in my backpack, cursing the universe for yet another delay in a life that felt like one endless string of obstacles. I was heading to what I thought was just another cattle call, one of those auditions where they'd look at me and see only my height, not my hunger, not my fire. But that bus, sputtering to a halt in the middle of traffic, with horns blaring and railing like judgment from above. That's where everything shifted. It seemed so trivial then, just another frustration in a city that didn't give a damn about anyone, let alone a guy like me trying to carve out a space in a world built for giants. But looking back, that breakdown wasn't a curse. It was the spark that ignited the red dog of my path. I would take you through it step by step, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the smallest cracks in our routines can let in the most profound light. Before that day, my life was a grind of quiet desperation. I graduated from Bennington College with dreams of Shakespearean soliloquies and complex characters, but reality hit like a cold. I was pounding the pavement in Manhattan, taking temp jobs to pay the rent, data entry, waiting tables, anything that didn't require me to stand on a stool to reach the counter. Acting gigs, they were few and far between, and when they came, they were often laced with the kind of pity or novelty that made my stomach turn. Oh, you're perfect for the dwarf role, they'd say, as if that was a compliment, as if my 4'5" frame was the sum of my talent. I'd audition for parts that demanded depth, only to be sidelined into caricatures. Self-pity? Oh, I wallowed in it, nights alone in my cramped apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I bothered. Why fight a system that saw me as a punchline? I resisted every inch, resisted the roles that played into stereotypes, resisted the advice to just take what you can get. I built walls around my ambition, convinced that the world was real. My friends would try to pep me up, saying things like, "Peter, you're brilliant, it'll happen." But inside, I was seething with resistance, a mix of anger and fear that kept me stuck. I'd skip networking events because I dreaded the stares, the whispers. Is that the little guy from that indie film? Yeah, that was me, shrinking further into myself. It wasn't just the industry, it was everything. Public spaces felt like battlegrounds. Stairs too steep, counters too high, crowds that swallowed me whole. I'd navigate the subway like a strategist, timing my commutes to avoid rush hour. But even then, the world reminded me of my differences. And on that rainy Tuesday, it all culminated. I was late, always late, it seemed, for an audition for some off-Broadway play. The part was a stretch, a philosopher grappling with existence, no mention of height in the breakdown. For once I thought, Maggie, this is it! I dashed out of my apartment, umbrella flipping inside out in the wind, and hopped on the M15 bus, heading downtown. The rain was relentless, turning the streets into rivers, and the bus was packed with the usual office workers, students, a few tourists, looking bewildered. I squeezed into a seat near the back, my mind racing through lines, rehearsing in my head. To be or not to be, I'd mutter under my breath, but twisted to fit the character's voice. Then, about halfway through the route near Union Square, the engine coughed. Once, twice, and then nothing. The driver announced over the intercom, "Folks, we're having mechanical issues. Sit tight, help's on the way." Groans rippled through the bus. I checked my watch. 20 minutes until the audition. Panic set in. I could have gotten off and walked, but the rating was biblical, and my script was already sodden. So I stayed, fuming, staring out the window at the blurred city lights. That's when the catalyst hit, though I didn't know it yet. Trivial, right? A bus breakdown happens to everyone. But in that forced pause, something unexpected unfolded. The woman next to me, an older lady with a shopping bag all overflowing with yarn, struck up a conversation. "These things always happen when you're in a hurry," she said, her voice warm despite the chill. I nodded politely. Not in the mood, but she kept going. Turned out she was a retired teacher and she started sharing stories from her classroom days. One stuck with me, a kid in her class back in the 70s who had a stutter so bad he could barely read aloud. Everyone wrote him off, including himself. But one day, during a school play, the lead actor got sick and this kid stepped in. Not perfectly, but with such raw determination that the audience erupted. It wasn't the lines he got right, she said. It was the ones he fought through that changed him. I listened, half distracted, but her words wormed their way in. Then, as the rain eased a bit, a mechanic showed up, tinkering under the hood. We all watched, restless, and in that idle time, I pulled out my damp script, flipping through pages. A line jumped out. "The obstacle is the way." It was from the play, but it echoed something deeper. Suddenly, the bus lurched back to life, cheers all around. But I didn't rush off. I missed the audition that day, walked in late, got a cart next. But on the ride home, that lady's story and that line collided in my mind. The breakdown wasn't just mechanical, it was I'd been seeing every hurdle as a dead end, but what if they were detours to something better? That insight hit like a thunderclap. Immediate, piercing. I realized my resistance wasn't protecting me, it was imprisoning me. All those years of self-pity, of fighting against my reality instead of through it. That was the real limitation. No. The bus forced to stop, a breath, and in that space I saw clearly life's frustrations aren't punishments, they're invitations to adapt, to find the hidden path. It sounded so simple, but it was profound. I got home that night soaked and defeated on the surface, but inside a fire was kindling, no more wallowing. The next day, I started small changes. I called my agent and said yes to a role I'd previously turned down, a quirky side character in an indie film, one that leaned into my uniqueness, but with room to infuse depth. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step. I began attending those networking events I'd avoided, owning the room instead of shrinking from it. Attitude shift from why to what now? Daily choices became deliberate. I'd wake up and journal 3 things I was grateful for, even if it was just a coffee that didn't spill. I dove into reading Stoicism, especially Epictetus, this ancient philosopher who was born a slave, living on one leg, yet he taught that true freedom comes from controlling your response to what's beyond your control. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, he wrote. That resonated. Here was a guy facing chains, literal and figurative, and he turned them into wisdom. It mirrored my own chains, the stares, the typecasting, and showed me how to break them. Another example that fueled my shift was the story of Vincent van Gogh. I remember reading about him during those post-bus days, holed up in a library to escape the rain. Van Gogh sold only 1 painting in his lifetime, struggled with mental illness, poverty, rejection. His brother Theo supported him, but the world dismissed his swirling skies and vibrant sunflowers as madness. Yet he painted relentlessly over 2,000 works in a decade, driven by an inner vision that no external validation. One anecdote stands out. After a brutal argument with Gauguin, he cut off his ear in despair. But even from that logo, he created self-portraits that captured raw. It wasn't the success that came posthumously. It was his refusal to let frustration extinguish his brush. I thought, if Van Gogh could channel agony into art, why couldn't Peter? I told myself, your height isn't a flaw, it's your palette. Use it. And so I did. I auditioned for parts that scared me, ones that demanded vulnerability. I joined a theater troupe in the village where we improvised scenes late into the night, laughing off the flops, practical changes. I readapt my really highlighting monologues where I own my presence. No more hiding. What? And slowly, the momentum built. As weeks turned to months, the actor unfolded in ways I couldn't have scripted. That indie film led to a connection with a director who saw potential beyond the obvious. I landed a role in Living in Oblivion, playing a frustrated actor, meta, writer, and it got noticed. Critics praised the authenticity, the fire I brought. But it was the daily attitude that sustained. I'd hit setbacks, a callback that went nowhere, a review that stung, but instead of retreating, I'd recall that bust, that forced pause, and pivot. What now? Became my mantra. I explored voice work, narration, things that transcended physicality. And then the big one, the station agent in 2003, Finbar McBride, a man isolating himself in a train depot, grappling with law. It was me, in a way, pre-bus me, resistant and alone. But post-bus, I poured everything into it, the frustration, the insight, the growth. Sundance loved it, awards followed. That film opened doors I didn't know existed. Suddenly, agents were calling, scripts piling up. But I chose carefully, roles with layers. Tyrion Lannister in Game of Thrones being the pinnacle. A character defined by wit, not woe, by strategy, not stature. Playing him, I drew from that catalyst, turning perceived weaknesses into weapons. The show's success, global phenomenon, Emmys stacking up, it all traced back to that rainy Tuesday. Without the breakdown, without that moment of clarity, I might still be temping, bitter, and stuck. Let me weave in one more motivational thread that guided me through the after. There's this ancient philosophy from the Stoics, but also echoed in literature, like in Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus, this king-turned-wanderer, faces gods, monsters, tempests. His journey home is riddled with frustrations, cyclops, sirens, shipwrecks. At one point, he's stranded on Calypso's island for years, tempted to give up. Oh, but he resists, chooses the hard path, and it's those trials that forge his cunning, his resilience. The gods envy us, he might say, because our struggles make us mortal, make us grow. I latched onto that during my ascent. When Game of Thrones shoots ran long in freezing Ireland mud, I'd think of Odysseus braving the seas. It wasn't glamour, it was gritted. And like him, my detours led home to a career where I dictate terms, produce my own projects, advocate for rights. I voiced characters in animated films, starred in blockbusters like X-Men, even delved into music with my band days echoing back. But the core change was internal, from resistance to embrace. Daily, I'd meditate on gratitude, mentor young actors facing their own hurdles, remind them that clarity often hides in chaos. Expanding on that post-catalyst, my routine transformed. Mornings started with walks, rain or shine, observing the city not as an adversary but as a teacher. I'd note small frustrations, a delayed train, a high shelf, and flip them. How can this build me? In auditions, I'd enter with presence, not apology. I'm Peter Dinklage, I'd say inwardly, and I bring the storm. Collaborations deepen. I sought directors like Tom McCarthy, who saw humanity first. Success read more. Broadway returns like Cyrano, where I reimagined a classic with my lens. But it's the quiet victories that matter, the confidence to say no to reductive roles, the joy in family life, away from spotlights. That bus taught me life's not a straight line. It's a web of unexpected threads. Weave them wisely. Diving deeper into the practical shifts, I overhauled my approach to rejection. Pre-bus, a no was a gut punch, sending me to the couch with a pint of ice cream and reruns. Post-bus, it was data. What worked? What didn't? I'd analyze tapes, seek feedback without ego. Networking. I hosted informal gatherings, turning strangers into allies. Financially, I budgeted fiercely during leave and health. Dwarfism brings eggs, but I committed to physical therapy. Yoga adapted for me, turning body into ally. These weren't overnight miracles. They were compounding choices, like interest in a bank. By 2011, when Game of Thrones premiered, I was ready, not just talented, but resilient. Tyrion's arc mirrored mine, from outcast to power player, using intellect over my fans connected. Letters poured in from people facing their own heights, disabilities, doubts, saying my story inspired. That's the ripple. One breakdown sparks waves. Reflecting on historical anecdotes, another that bolstered me was Frida Kahlo's. Bedridden after a bus accident. Ironic, a bus again. She turned pain into paint. Her self-portraits raw. As a child, then that crash shattering her body, yet she created amid agony, defying norms. I take myself because I am so often alone, she said. In my alone moments post-catalyst, I channel that, writing monologues, sketching ideas. It wasn't mimicry, it was inspiration to alchemize frustration. Kahlo's vibrancy amid brokenness reminded me, scars aren't endpoints, they're stories. As years stacked, successes mounted, Avengers, Voice in Destiny, producing, I care a lot. but the thread pulls back to that Tuesday. Without the bus, no forced reflection. Without reflection, no shift. It's funny. Life's turning points masquerade as annoyances. We rage at them, missing the gift. Now, as I wrap this tale, let me tie it tight. That broken down bus, trivial and frustrating, became my greatest ally. It halted my rush, forced a mirror to my self-pity, and unveiled the truth. Success isn't handed. It's seized from the jaws of setback. From struggling actor to Emmy winner, from resistance to reign, it's all connected. My current life, family, fulfillment, platforms to amplify voices like mine stems from embracing the unexpected. So here's the actionable takeaway. Next time life throws a curve, a delay, a door that won't read. Ask what clarity hides here. Don't resist. Investigate. Turn the trivial into transformative. Find your bus moment and let it carry you forward. Because in those cracks, the light gets in, and that's where you truly begin to shine. Thank you for listening. Now go chase your own detours.